Hello, everyone. I'm Adrian Sanabria, host of the Enterprise Security Weekly podcast, and I'm here to host another installment of SC Media's InFocus. These interviews feature some of the top thought leaders in the cybersecurity space. This is an opportunity for these experts to share hindsight on recent events and foresight on where you should be focused as a cybersecurity professional in the near future. Today, we're discussing improving defenses based on observed ransomware patterns. We'll be discussing some insights around when ransomware attacks happen, when organizations' defenses are weakest, how to fill gaps in organizations' defenses. Joining me today is Mickey Bresman, CEO at Semperis. How are you, Mickey?
Hey, Adrian, thank you for having me.
Yeah, excited to have you here. I enjoyed the report and I'm excited to dig into it. So let's do it.
Yeah,
So I understand this is the second report to come out of a large survey that you put together around ransomware and identity security.
correct. We have partnered with Census wide, and we served about 1,000 different organizations across the US, UK, France, Germany, so multiple different locations, where the idea was that we wanted to get actual insights on how they're dealing with ransomware situations, how many of those are actually occurring in the different countries, and what is the typical response when something like that happens.
Yeah, and insights you got enough insights that this is the second report to come out of that survey, correct?
No, we actually served it again for the second time, so it was two separate.
Oh, okay. Got you. Interesting. Yeah, and there are some insights here. I've done incident response for a large part of my career. I was chief incident responder. I spend a lot of time investigating uh, how breaches happen, how companies fail. And some of these insights, this is the first time I'm hearing some of these. So I'm kind of excited for you to share these. And one of the biggest insights that came out of this survey is about when ransomware attackers uh, choose to launch their attacks or to do, I guess, maybe the behind the scenes attack work before you get the extortion letter, right?
Potentially both. It's interesting because we have incident response service that we provide as Semperis with a specific focus on the identity side of things. And one thing that we were joking about, but now it kind of became the standard, is that it typically takes place on Friday afternoon or towards the evening when we get the call. And the call typically happens after all of the reconnaissance have been done by the adversary, and now they're in a point where they have actually started to execute the ransomware attack. So I think should have not have been very surprising, but we did find it a bit
Right.
surprising. The fact that the closest thing that you have to a long weekend will be holidays, right? So if you think about it, when we all go out for our winter break, for those of us with kids and so on, that typically means that you're really taking time off and going to spend time with family. Um, that probably means that that's when your defenses are kind of in their less strong position. You're the weakest at that point in time because you have less people and you want your people to take the downtime that they deserve. And we all want to be able to spend time with our families during the holidays. So I think to some degree it was surprising, but if you really think about it, not really. What I'm referring to is the fact that during holiday seasons, that's actually when we see the spike in
Mhm.
those attacks.
Yeah, and it does. I totally get what you're saying. Like, I wasn't surprised to see it. I was kind of surprised to see the numbers, though. The actual stats are 86% of those targeted by ransomware were attacked on a holiday or a weekend, and 76% of targeted organizations suffered a ransomware attack during a major corporate event, like a merger, acquisition, IPO. So it doesn't surprise me that they choose to do that. I just never seen any stats on how much of it happens in those times, and, and it is a little bit depressing seeing them that strategic. That they're aware that these are the best times to attack. But now that the information is out in the open, we can do something with it, right?
100%. I think to your point, this is something that we kind of knew on a small scale, so not on the 1,000 organizations. Because let's say that we as a company seeing
Yeah.
about two of those on a monthly basis, which
Right.
is going to be tens a year. This is 1,000 organizations that got surveyed. Now, more than that, in some cases, I'm sure that you are well aware, not every ransomware situation is being reported. I think
Right.
things now are changing a bit because the regulations are requiring it. But until not that long ago, and some companies don't fall under the same regulation, companies were not reporting ransomware as much as it was actually happening. So I think what that survey actually gave us is a view into what really happens with companies out there, which I think is a very interesting point of view to get. The other thing is that the IPO or merger and acquisition situation, it was something that we already were aware of. I actually know that many companies at this point in time, when they're going through an M&A process, they actually put money aside to a potential cyber incident that they will need to deal with because
Hmm.
of the merger that is happening. I think in some cases people were asking, well, why mergers and acquisitions? Like, why specifically at that point in time? And I guess to me, the answer is there are several different reasons. The first one is the fact that you drive attention to your company, right? Because
Right.
you just acquired another company. It's probably going to be covered in multiple news outlets. So it kind of gives somebody the reason to go after you. The other one is going to be because the assumption is that during the merger time is going to be chaotic. So you'll
Yeah.
have people changing roles. You will have potentially some of the workforce being reduced. There will be a lot of different reasons of what can go wrong. That what more is interesting is that if a large enterprise that have great defenses, let's assume for a minute, have now acquired a smaller company that have less defensive, then
Right.
potentially from the bad actor perspective, if I can breach that less protective environment, then that can be a beachhead that I'll be using to get into the larger target that I'm really after. So
Yeah.
if unless the large enterprise, when they're acquiring the smaller one, really do certain activities like assessing their risk, assessing the security posture of the acquired company, I can take advantage of that and by compromising the less protected organization, get inside the more protected one.
And just speaking of that chaos, I imagine like business email compromise, stuff like that is maybe a lot easier. You can just say, "Hey, I'm from the new parent organization, right? And as we're getting things going, we don't have permanent processes in place. Temporarily, I need you to send funds here, or something like that. Like all kinds of opportunities for social engineering and business email compromise. Uh, Employees are vulnerable. They're in a vulnerable state. They don't know, who's getting let go, who's staying, who's going, how the companies are going to be merged, what processes are going to be affected. Yeah, it's a huge opportunity.
Oh, 100%. People don't really know Joe Schmo calling me right now, maybe he is
Right.
indeed from that company because I know that we've been acquired and I know that we have a
Yeah.
new CFO, something that we now will be reporting into. So if this new CFO instructs me to do something, then I am more likely to do that. Now, an interesting point, by the way, which is something to consider, people that operate our support systems, the help desk in most organizations, one of the things that we really appreciate about them is the fact that they are there to help and they will do whatever they can to satisfy the request that is coming in. So if you are calling and you cannot log in and you need help with your password reset or whatever the case might be, you really want your support help organization to be such that they will try to help you as much as they can. And then that actually, in some cases, can work against you. The fact
Yeah.
that they want to go that extra mile and assist the organization.
Yeah. And I love that this report focuses on time, on attack and defense in terms of how they fit on a timeline, because I feel like a lot of organizations, when they put a process in place or a security control in place, they just kind of assume that it's now in place, right? They don't think, maybe it's 80% less effective at midnight, right? Or it's less effective on a weekend, or, it's more effective here rather than there, and just kind of shining a light on that, I think, does give everybody an opportunity to think, okay, how are we going to solve that problem? Because I imagine not everybody can just throw follow the sun 24/7, 365 support around it, which is why we see so much more use of MSSPs, right? And outsourcing this stuff.
100%. And I think also to some degree, there might be two colliding policies that are happening at the company at the same time. What I mean by that is that the company might potentially have something that they refer to as the quiet period or a shutdown period, where they actually encourage employees not to work during the period of, let's say, the last 2 weeks before the end of the year, where we typically have most of the holidays times. But at the same time, if you apply the same for your SOC as an example, or for whatever critical security functions that you have, then you actually might be shooting yourself in the leg to some degree, because what you're doing, you're actually reducing the amount of your defense at the same time where the bad actors will try to do whatever they can to take advantage of the fact that because we're in such a period, it makes more sense to me to kind of call you from somewhere. And some of those attacks might potentially be more successful. Now, there is another side to that, and that if you think about anything that have e-commerce or something similar as part of the main business, then obviously taking them down during the holiday is going to be the most painful because for some of those companies, they make a very big part of their revenues during the holiday season. So that's obviously why they will be targeted more. So you have those kind of colliding policies that I would refer to those, where on one hand, you take the quiet time, you want to have your employees to have more of downtime during the holiday season. At the same time, what we know now is that actually the adversaries are more active during that period of time. And to your point, one of the things that we should do as organizations now that we're aware of that is we actually need to beef up our security defenses during the holiday season, or at the very least, I would say, keep them at the same level as we have them during the standard working days.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, and anybody who's experienced a scam or anything like that, we know that attackers look to leverage, find some sense of urgency or leverage anxiety and stress. That's why it's your CEO is the one that's asking for those gift cards, right? Like it's not somebody lower in the organization. It's somebody you don't want to let down or disappoint.
For sure. The amount of times that I get, I used to get more of those. Now I think our workforce is more educated at this point. But
Yeah,
the amount of times that I used to get those questions of, have you asked me to buy, or have you asked me to, one of those requests that they're all getting. I can tell you from our own experience, one of the things that I installed in the company is that no matter what request you get from me, and I think every one of our employees get it as the training when they are being onboarded, no matter what
mhm,
request you got from me for buying me something or getting purchase cards or whatever the case might be, unless I have reached out to you on one of our secured channels, which we have those, I'm obviously not going to tell you live
right.
now which ones, but it's not an SMS and it's not a phone call. By default, I'll
Yeah.
tell them that you can completely ignore, and I promise you that I will never get upset that you ignored an SMS that was coming from me. By the way, now it's even more interesting. I don't know if you've seen it or not, but um, CISA just made a recommendation the other day, I think like 2 or 3 days ago, that the extent of the breach that we had into the telco providers here in the
Yeah.
US, AT&T, Verizon, and I think some others, is actually bigger than was initially understood. And the recommendation now is
Yeah.
not to rely on text messages at all, and they assume that those actually are being compromised.
Yeah, the very organizations trying to convince us there should be backdoors in systems so that they can fulfill law enforcement requests. Now they want us to use Signal and end-to-end encrypted communications. A little bit of irony there, but it's the right thing to tell the public, right?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. Eventually, they do want to protect the public, and I'm going to operate under the assumption that they are looking for the best interest of the
Yeah.
overall. Yeah.
Finally, before we wrap up here, this report also covers the level of preparedness when it comes to recovering from identity-based attacks. And there's some surprising statistics here as well.
Yeah, I think one of the things that are interesting about that one, and we've seen this multiple times. First of all, just to understand what is identity-based attacks, what does it actually mean? I think in basically pretty much every report out there, not just ours, will call out that 9 out of 10 attacks will have something like the Active Directory, which is the core identity platform
Mhm.
for most organizations, right in the midst of it. And I don't know if you've seen that one, but the Five Eyes, so NSA, CISA, the Australian equivalent, the Canadian one, they released a report about 60 days ago that specifically calls out the defenses that the organization should have in place for their identity stores. And it kind of emphasizes the exact same point that we tried to make and that we got from this survey as well, which is that the bad actors are going to go after the directory stores that you have in your organizations. Because if I control the directory store of the organization, I can either become you if I want to, or I can take it down and then you cannot access anything. So both of those reasons are extremely painful. And the interesting thing to me from that perspective is that if the infrastructure goes down and that now shuts down the entire organization, how well are you prepared in terms of your ability to recover that infrastructure? And I always ask people, don't just do a tabletop exercise on paper. Do
Yeah.
actual recovery test and see what it looks like.
Yeah. I used to do a lot of DR and BCP work, and yeah, I was smiling a little bit reading that 70% of study respondents claim to have an identity recovery plan, and I'm immediately thinking in my head, yeah, you think you do, but unless you've thrown that switch, unless you've actually done that restore, yeah, don't count on that. You've probably missed a few things that you need for that to go smoothly.
For sure. If you haven't tried it and if you have not thought about, well, how do you make sure that you don't reintroduce the bad actor back into your system? Because if your environment has been compromised and it probably happened not 5 minutes before the actual execution of ransomware,
Right.
then the
Maybe a
bad
month
actor,
before.
right.
Yeah.
So there's a very good chance that the malware was already part of your backup. There is already a good chance that the backdoors were already part of your backup. So how do you even recover something that is already infected? And yeah, those are the things that we definitely would want people to think about.
Yeah, great point. And I recommend everybody check out the report. I think the statistics are very useful. When coming up with security strategy. Maybe trying to convince executives. That you need some funding for something or you need to focus on something. I think while not a lot of surprising stuff, like it's important to have the data and to be able to point to this data and say, well, look, now we have data on this. We know it happens weekends, holidays, during these different events. I think sometimes that gives security leaders the firepower they need to actually go and solve these issues. So great stuff. Thank you, Mickey, for joining me today and talking me through the report. Um, Loved having you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And thanks to everybody listening. Thank you for being in focus with us today.